Today I'm going to talk about Minecraft and zombies and composition course. So just like show of hands, who's here for the zombies? Awesome. All right. Who's here for Minecraft? The composition? Okay. All right. Cool. All right. In addition to, yeah. And so this is basically the whole presentation. I've gone very heavy on applied. Like I really kind of just want to show you how the class ran and how it operated. A little light on theory, but I'm more than happy to talk, articles and research with you afterwards or in the questions. So we're just going to kind of walk through the development of it and sort of how I got going with the idea of using the games in the class, and then discuss the nuts and bolts of the papers and the writing process. And periodically you're going to see quotes in blue text. Those are directly from my students. So I really kind of have a lot of student input with this, and they really help direct the class as well. And just to give you some background, so my name is Jeff Kuhn. I'm at Ohio University, and I work for the English Language Improvement Program. And this is, we have two programs for international students. One is the pre-academic courses, and that's a program called OPE. But ELIP is for students who matriculate into the university. So my students are full members of the undergrad community, but we take the international students and the American students and separate them out at the freshman composition level, just because for the international students we need to spend a little more time on the styles of writing, so they're not as familiar with like the genres of English composition and things like that. So we have this class. They're all international students, but yet it is a credit-bearing requirement for their undergrad education. And so this is what I do. I also am a PhD candidate in the College of Education, where I'm studying games and learning under Dr. Sean Dickers, who's been around the conference if you've seen him. And this is, so English 1610 is my class. I get to do a lot with it. I teach it twice every semester. And, one of the issues I've had with the class is, students are coming in and I see writing one way. When I think about my writing class, it's the greatest thing in the world. But my students, they have sort of that more blasé point of view where they're just not looking to do any writing. So they don't really come into the class excited. That doesn't mean that they're bad students. They're just not so excited. And it makes sense because, Rafe Koster, he talks about puzzles. We like puzzles, we like games until we solve them, right? So once we've solved something, we're done with it. You think of tic-tac-toe. As an adult, how many of you have played tic-tac-toe? Did you enjoy it? No, because it's solved. Like tic-tac-toe is a possibility space the human brain can solve. Checkers now is a solved game. A computer has figured out the perfect game of checkers. And, chess, probably within the next, 10, 15 years, chess will be solved as well. But tic-tac-toe is a great example of a space that we can just look at it, figure out all the possible combinations, be like, well, I don't need to do that. Or we don't have to play it anymore. And I kind of associate my classroom to that sense too. My students have solved this space. They come in and they know exactly what they have to do and how to do it. And so it really doesn't have that much appeal to them anymore. Same as, a game of tic-tac-toe. They're like, well, I know the drill. So I thought, how can I shake up the class and to, bring some more variables in and just get them excited and get them engaged in the class. And I've been reading a lot of the the scholarly articles, and Kurt Squire, who's done a lot with games and learning, he talked about designed experiences. He says, educators, we can look at games as these designed experiences. Someone programmed a series of options and actions that students can do. And Cole, back in '84, he talked about learning is its most powerful when there's a direct experience, right? So I can read about fixing a car, or I can go out and try fixing a car and see what happens. So, I asked myself, could I create a designed direct experience in my classroom to get my students to have something as fodder for their writing, to kind of spur them on? And so I looked to different games, and, games, for the longest time, games have done two things well. Computers themselves, as machines, do two things well. Computers do spreadsheets really well, and they do spatial relations really well. They don't do emotion so well. A computer never cries, right? But if you look at the most popular types of games, traditionally, Um, Civilization, like your world building game, SimCity, Civilization, that's database management, right? That's a spreadsheet. Call of Duty, some of the first person shooter games, that's spatial relation. And so, naturally that's what video games have done really well, because that's what computers do really well. So we've had some good games, but looking towards games that have a little more emotional punch, a little more direct experience has only been, possible fairly recently, I would argue. And, a couple reasons for that is we've seen a huge increase in power. So, anybody who played Super Mario, it ran, the old Nintendo 8-bit ran on 2.1 hertz, whereas the Xbox 360 is 2.4 billion hertz. So you're seeing a huge increase in computational power, and that gives, creators a lot more space to do things. But I think also as importantly, you've got game developers are now grown-up game players. So you have an entire generation of people who grew up playing games. And so as a teacher, we're looking towards the games like, I love this thing. I want to bring it with me into the classroom. And, how can I do that? And so even you're seeing teachers who like games. You're seeing game creators who've spent their whole lives with this arena and are really comfortable in designing. And we're seeing games with a lot more nuance now and a lot more flexibility. So that's really kind of made games much more appealing for me as well. And, we're always going to get games or movies that are just big explosions and loud noises. But, we can see games that are a lot more personal, a lot more unique. There's a guy by the name of Jason Rohrer, Rohrer. His games are really great. They're really simple, but they're incredibly, incredibly complex and yet simplistic at the same time. I mean, you talk about like emotion in game. That game company also is another great group of people who are making sort of more art games that provide more experience than just power fulfillment. And so, that's why I started looking for is, can I find a designed direct experience that's more than just explosions and power fulfillment, yet still have zombies, apparently. And a little more of the research. So like Wagner and Brewer talked about how social interaction promotes competence in a language and culture. Like you got to have social interaction when you're dealing in language. And, I think whether it's, you're practicing a foreign language or you're just writing and practicing the written word, the more interaction you can have, that's experience that, can kind of give you an angle with which to write or different perspectives on points of views. And Chang 2007 had a really interesting article where she studied the use of virtual environments and found that there's less incidence of plagiarism, and there's a higher relationship to the ownership of the material that the students write, because every experience is unique for them. So they all have these unique experiences inside the game they can use towards their writing. And so how can I get students to all have an experience that they can write about, but then again have a shared experience? So if we're doing peer review in my classroom, I hand you my paper, you hand me mine. I know exactly what you're talking about because we both had that experience to some degree. So this all kind of formed my thoughts going into this class, and it's been about a 2-year design process. It's been an iterative design process with this class. And so what could I do to get things going? And I really wanted to focus on experience. And Todd Howard, who's one of my favorite game designers, he always starts with a picture. He looks at a picture and he says, that's what I want my game to feel like. The feeling I get looking at this picture, that's what the game should be. So when he made the game Skyrim, he started with this picture. He said, that will be the game. And so, what can that feeling or that experience be? And my students, they really identified with that. So they like the idea of having this experience and knowing what to do. And I'd like to point out that Pixie was a much better zombie fighter than War Machine, surprisingly. But Pixie was kind of awesome. So having these experiences, having this feeling. So I was looking for that thing. And I actually stumbled across, the Walking Dead comic book, and I saw this picture, and I was like, that's the class. That's the feeling I want my students to have right there. So I looked at this picture, and I was like, now how can I build my class around this picture? And so, I started exploring and things. And where I started with was, well, what would be the purpose of bringing zombies into the classroom? And I really thought about it, and I was like, well, a critical analysis. So over the whole course of the semester, all the readings we do all have something to do with zombies. And not just the zombies themselves, but sort of the discussion, the cultural discussion going around zombies. So one of the first things we do is we research the phenomenon of zombies. What is it about zombies that are alluring? So like we skimmed some Google News headlines, and mystery virus, and there's all these things popping up all over the world. There's pessimism with the American government and the way things are going with the economy. There's this fear of technology turning us all into zombies. So how do all these sort of relate? So when people think about zombies, when the economy is good, are zombie movies as popular or less popular? Maybe we should go find that out. And so looking at how to research things and asking a question. So my students would all have to ask a question. Well, why are zombies popular now versus 10 years ago? Does something to do with a general pessimism? One student, he ended up analyzing horror movies and disaster movies popular in America versus back in China. And he said, well, the economy's really good in China, so we don't like horror movies. And, it was clumsy, but it was a good start. He had a good academic agenda. Other things we do is we kind of look at the different genres. Zombies have kind of spread from just horror movies. Now they're in comedy movies and romance movies, dramas. The Walking Dead is a very popular show right now. And with my students being international students, I also wanted them to kind of think about, well, what's happening in American conversation these days? So what are some things I can talk about with other students? So we watched some clips from Walking Dead. We look at different ways zombies are done in different movies. One of my students ended up writing a paper on how zombies have changed. It turns out he loved George Romero's first movie, and so he discussed how Romero defined what a zombie is, that slow, shambling walk, but 28 days later allowed them to run. Are they still zombies? If zombies are fast, are they still zombies? So he was kind of looking at like the definition of what is and isn't a zombie. And so that really kind of was a fun angle that he could look at. Other things we did is we read academic articles, and I have to admit this one was tough for me because it's all math, but a couple of my engineering students, they were, yeah, I get it. So we looked at, can zombies be academic? And one of the things I wanted to stress with my students in using a game and using zombies was any topic can be academic if it's written properly, if it's angled properly, if we research it properly and ask the right questions. So this was sort of an example, and these numbers down here at the bottom, this is the formula that basically says you have no chance of surviving. You'll never survive the zombie apocalypse. They will win. And I let my students go through the entire semester, and then week 14 I showed them that and said, you're all going to fail. And, but they got a kick out of it, and they really enjoyed that. And, other things we talked about, what would happen? So if we kind of looked at different things of the zombie apocalypse. So for instance, this is Atlanta, and it shows after 1 hour, 3 hours, 24 hours, what would happen. So a city the size of Atlanta would fall to the zombie invasion in about a day. So we talked about that. Okay, well, what would we do in this situation? The final project of the class is students had to protect the city of Athens, Ohio from a zombie invasion. So we kind of looked at, well, if Atlanta has no chance of succeeding, what chance does the city of Athens have? And they had to kind of figure out, and problem solve and ways to protect our city. Other things we did, so the Center of Disease Control and Prevention has a zombie preparedness website. So you can go to their website and they help you build a zombie preparedness kit, and they have a little graphic novel that shows you the zombie apocalypse happening. And so we asked, well, why would they do this? What is the author's purpose in having a zombie website? If the CDC is such an academic thing, why would they do something so silly? And we came across that idea. Well, if I'm prepared for a zombie apocalypse in a joke, I'm prepared for a tornado, earthquake. So other things. So students got to see, if I frame something to my audience properly, they'll digest it versus just ignoring it because it's too. And so how do you branch that out? Can we use examples, right? So zombies being an example. So we looked at all these different things inside the class, and I think, from a traditional writing classroom point, this all works. But one of the things I really wanted to do, especially with international students, is, we can read a lot, but a lot of times there's a lot of context. The words, the vocabulary, a lot of the stuff is kind of new. So is there another way that we can present the material to give them a fuller frame of reference for this idea? And so what could we do to practice this, to see it in action, and to do these things and have an experience with it, so we can take what we read, take what we experienced, and put it all into a paper together? And so basically I created our little play space for the class, and I had two things. So Minecraft, and then predominantly the book World War Z and the Zombie Survival Guide. Has anybody read World War Z? Okay.
One of my favorite books.
Awesome. It's for those of you who've only seen the movie, I apologize. But actually the book is much more like Studs Terkel's World War II narratives. So he basically it's 10 years after the zombie war. People are reflecting on this experience. What did they do during this time? So he kind of goes through the whole zombie war through personal reflections. So it's a much, much better book. It's definitely a great book.
I always tell people, even if they don't like zombies, it's about people. It's not about zombies.
Yeah.
And how these people survive. And you could apply it to anything.
Exactly. Because if it's a zombie chapter, it would just be for 20 pages, right? So we looked at those, and we didn't read the whole book back to front, or front to back, sorry. But we did kind of take sections out that I felt were relevant for giving context. So this was our city, and I started out with this entire city, and this is not my map. I actually modified it, but didn't originally create it. This is a map called Broville, sadly, but but it was a great city. I couldn't resist it. And so basically what I did was I never told the students this would be a zombie class, but we were playing Minecraft. I let them play for about a week to get accustomed to the game, and then I unleashed the zombies. And so suddenly this thing occurred, and now we had to kind of figure it out. So it started out peacefully enough. Students were all over the place, and life was good, and then suddenly this event occurs. Zombies start attacking, and eventually students began to congregate, and they eventually congregated to this little building here, which is the university. And they kind of walled up in there and just waited. And that had disastrous consequences, actually. So then I used two modifications for the game Minecraft. And the first modification was Minecraft Comes Alive. And what that does is it creates a lot of non-playable characters inside the game and gives them all unique identities. So besides the 15 students in the class, we had several hundred of these little characters that just ran around that could have little conversations and talk just a little bit. The other one I used was the Walking Dead mod, and it basically just creates a lot of different looking zombies. And the zombies don't burn up in daylight. If you're familiar with Minecraft, all the creatures burn in daylight. So these zombies could go all over the place. Some of them would have armor or weapons perhaps as well. So I put those in to give this a better feeling to the whole game, a little more richness to it. So I had some basic general rules to the game where students were given no initial supplies. I just had them inside the game going about their little lives and kind of discovering things. Any change that the students or the zombies or I made to the game were permanent. So if you accidentally blew something up, it is gone. And it was a 24/7 private server, so I had a server set up in my desktop computer in my office, and I left it on all the time, so students could play whenever they wanted. This last point here, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, but what I found was the students were largely playing alone or in small groups, so I decided to kind of force the issue of getting them to think as a group. So what I did is I said you have 100 points as a class, and each time someone dies, I'm taking 3 points off of that. And that's going to be your homework grade. So the more everyone dies, the worse your homework grade is going to be. Because I wanted them to start, going together. And what was interesting is after about a week of doing this, it completely fell apart because now they just wanted to play together. Once they got, past that icebreaker stage of playing together, they really enjoyed it, and this largely disappeared. And what was funny is they very quickly metagamed. We were collecting data on this, so we're going to do a little research paper on this. And my director came in, and she interviewed these students, and she asked them about this point system. One student said, Jeff won't let us fail like that. The class is a writing class. It's not a game class. We can't fail by playing this game. So very quickly they saw through it even, which was kind of interesting. So they started looking at not just what we're doing in the game, but what are Jeff's agendas for this as well. And after this, we kept reading. So we'd read different sections and, kind of look at how do the tips, the advice, the stories in these books, how can they help us survive the zombies inside of Minecraft? The other thing I did with the class is I moved all of the writing over to Google Docs. So every student had a Google Doc page, because as writing teachers, we tend to see first draft, second draft, and then maybe like a final draft. And to me, that really doesn't show me how the students are writing. It just shows me what they've produced. So I moved all of the writing over to Google Docs so I could see a non-linear approach to writing. So now instead of giving me drafts, their paper is just in perpetual beta until they give me a final. So one thing Google Docs does is it allows you to put in comments, much like Microsoft Word, but we can do it in real time. So as my students were writing in class, I could be on my computer and look at their paper, jump in, add a few comments, jump out, look at the next person's. So I could do things like that, but then also I could use the revision history to see what they were changing. So students would write, we came to class, would they take what we learned in class and add it into their writing? So I was really kind of curious to see that. So I would go in after class and see if they're adding information in. Are they making changes based on what they've learned? Are we seeing a progression of knowledge and that informing their writing? So that was another reason I went to Google Docs. So it created this whole situation where basically we had the book, the game, the writing, and they all sort of rolled together. And the paper, or the papers for the class, we had 3 major papers besides a lot of little journals. So the first paper we had to do is researching a phenomenon, and then where we asked questions, and then we argued a position where they had to pick a side, and then finally they had to offer a solution to a problem. So the first paper is our researching a phenomenon, and this one was Minecraft is quiet and peaceful, there are no real problems, and then suddenly the zombie apocalypse occurs. The dead have come back to life, they're walking around, so they need to develop theories as to what's going on. So we had to analyze, what are zombies, what have they done, how do we stop them? So they could go off and do internet-based research on these different things. They could look at the zombie survival guide and find, what causes zombies? How do we fight against them? What kills them? So that was the first paper. And the other thing we started doing is looking at the phenomenon of basically the sociology around zombies. So this is a quote from Brooks's World War Z, and it's this character Jessica. Her and her family flee into Canada, and they find this camp of survivors, and suddenly they feel safe. Suddenly the threat of the zombies is little lessened. But then when they realize that help isn't coming and winter is coming, what do? So this whole group spirit of this camp started to fall apart and collapse, and people started to fight and fend for themselves. And Jessica narrates a story. So we read that. And then we looked at how the students were playing the game inside of Minecraft, and they were all on their own. And it was very cutthroat at the beginning. So one student, he wrote his entire paper about why he was hoarding supplies. So he says, I know where supplies are in this world, and I'm keeping them to myself. The question is why? So he analyzed his own behavior inside the game, and he tried to justify it too. He said, here are 3 possible reasons I'm doing this. One is because he thought giving out the supplies would promote laziness. One was that maybe he wants to become leader. So he's jockeying for a position of leadership inside of the game. And so we really kind of looked at that. And we looked at different, videos. There's a lot of videos on, if you're familiar with the philosophical dilemma of the train. So there's a guy, you can push him onto the train tracks to save 5 people down the road. So we had those discussions as well. And as I mentioned, some students, they researched what are zombies. And I let them, at this early stage, step out of the game as well. So they could analyze, what makes zombies popular in America today? What do zombies represent? So as long as it had some sort of aspect to either the survival or the zombies, it was open fodder for this paper. The next paper was arguing a position, and with the arguing a position paper, we set up some guidelines, and this was basically Act 2 in a 3-act play. And so we kind of discussed how this is where usually things are at their worst. And honestly, the students were they were not faring well in the zombie world. They were holed up in the university, and they had made no progress. They had named me the Zombie King at this point, and they were against me to a certain extent because they knew I was the source of the problem. But the other interesting thing is I populated the university they were holed up in. I populated it with a lot of non-playable characters, so it wasn't just the students, but there were other people in this university as well. And I said, something's got to give. You guys have to make a plan moving forward, because otherwise humanity is going to go away. You guys are the last of humanity. What should you do? And so we talked about the Rediker plan, and this is from World War Z. And the Rediker plan basically suggests that you take some of your population and you sacrifice them as zombie bait, and you take your key personnel and you put them into a safe area, and let the others draw the zombies. 15 students, one student supported this idea. He's like, this is what we should do in Minecraft. And here are the players. Here are my fellow students who should live. Here are my fellow players who should die. And it was harsh. And every other student argued against this plan. They argued that it was a bit unethical. They argued that the game didn't quite warrant this behavior. And what was interesting is we also discussed how the players, being all international students, collectivist cultures versus individualist cultures. As an American, I'm much more likely to throw you in front of the truck than maybe some of my students were. And so we kind of discussed that. Would this idea change, and how would different cultures, handle this situation? So only David there supported the Rediker plan, and that plays a part in the next paper, actually, which is kind of fun because this one we really focused on logic, and it was great because one of my students on his Google Doc wrote, we saved Jeff first, and one of the other students posted, but what can he do? Right? He was like, we gotta save Jeff, he's our teacher. And the other students were like, Jeff serves no purpose, throw him to the zombies. I was like, yes, great. But I couldn't justify myself. But what was really interesting about this paper is I started really seeing a lot of detail from the game come out in this paper. So this particular student, Steven, he argued against the Rediker plan, and he gave very specific details as, well, we have enough supplies. We just need to go find them. Here's where we have a lot of supplies. This will help us survive this thing. So he looked at, we don't need to sacrifice everyone because there's plenty to go around, at least for the short term. And so, he kind of had some very specific details. So students really started to draw from the game and reference specific places inside the game. And then they would also cite the zombie survival guide. They would cite, these things. Because, our students, especially the international students, they have a tough time with APA and they're starting to get used to it. So I really kind of narrowed down. I said, you can reference the game, you can reference these 2 books. Because I wanted them to spend less time going to find the information and more time how to actually put it into their writing cohesively. So having that constraint was really nice. Constance Steinkuhler, if you're familiar with her work, she defines a game as well-defined constraints and ill-defined solutions. And so that's really kind of what I wanted to do. You can use these 3 books, but how you use them, is entirely up to you. So after the arguing paper, we were kind of in the home stretch, and at this point we switched over to this proposing a solution, and we stepped out of Minecraft and we stepped into the city of Athens, Ohio. And I said, all right, you guys have become zombie experts over the last 10 weeks. Your goal now is to protect the city of Athens should the zombie apocalypse occur. So we began by outlining. So we are going to have a class 4 zombie outbreak, and a class 4 means the zombies are everywhere. It's the apocalypse. The current solution to this is everyone is for themselves. It's just chaos. So my students are being asked by the mayor of Athens to step in and establish control and set up a safe zone and do all they can. Given their Minecraft experience, they're Athens' only hope. And so we put them into small groups. There are 3 groups of students, and they all had to come up with their own different ways of solving this. And so what became interesting is that for this, everyone adopted the Rediker plan. So before they were against it, but when they were looking at a population of 50,000 people, they were like, it's not going to work. We can't save everyone. So they started deciding who lives and who dies. One particular group, they took a little area, our South Green, our dormitories here. So they looked at that and they said, there are 700 beds in those dormitories, so we can save 700 people. Everyone else, sorry, you're on your own. And so we looked at, the academic article. We kind of looked at the mathematical formula. We tried to guesstimate how much time do we have before the zombies completely wash over the city. And so the different groups all came up with different proposals that they felt were the best. And what was interesting is, typically with this is, at the end they all have to give a presentation, and then there's a question and answer session at the end. For the first time, I've never had to ask a question. The other groups were asking questions and testing them on their zombie knowledge. One group basically argued that they could use the river to go between their safe zone and Walmart and Kroger to scavenge for supplies. And early in their presentation, they said, this is November, it's Thanksgiving break, so students are largely gone. So they bought themselves a little space there. And one group raised hands and says, yeah, but come December, that river's probably going to be froze, right? Zombies can walk on the ice. They said, well, actually, no, the river won't freeze until, February. And the other students said, yeah, but how deep is the Hocking River? And they started really questioning one another on sort of their zombie preparedness, which I really thought was amazing, because getting my students to always ask like very specific, detailed questions has been a challenge. But they really kind of got into it, and they really got into like questioning one another. So that water system you're relying on, that's going to go out in 4 or 5 days. What do you do after that? And so it really kind of expanded out. And the students, they came away with it. We kept asking them over the whole course of the semester how they felt, what they liked, what they'd like to see done. And the students, they really liked the social aspect. As I mentioned, at the beginning, they weren't big on playing together, because they were just a little, shy, I guess would be the way to say it. But then once they got playing together, they really enjoyed that, and they really enjoyed playing with me too as a teacher. Even though I was in charge of the zombies, they liked to have me in the game as well. And so we would devote some class time to playing and give them a chance to socialize. One of the difficulties, though, with outside of class is they really struggled that because the server is open all day, every day, I might get on, but no one else is on at the same time. So they would feel kind of lonely inside the game. So what we ended up doing was they got into small groups of 3 or 4, and they would have designated times they would all get on during the week. It's kind of like homework points. So they all actually organized times that they would get on together and play. And largely, besides just sort of facilitating the scheduling, I didn't have anything to do with that. They all organized it themselves. They really liked the possibility space of the game. They could try different things. They could fail and try it again, and then use that as kind of fodder for their writing. So they could write their little daily journals about what they did, how many zombies they fought, and where they think the zombies are coming from, things like that. Ownership, the students were really excited about the idea of suddenly they had this experience that they could draw from. The writing they got to write about was their own. And so instead of someone else's work. And this was, from a teacher point of view, this was really kind of the hardest balance. Was, my class has course objectives, and so I have to meet those. Part of that is learning different styles and learning how to write. But how do I get students to use sources but still be largely their own experience driven was a big challenge. But once they got the hang of it, they really liked that idea of, hey, wait, my sources aren't the number one priority. My ideas are first, and the sources support that. They really kind of figured that out, which was kind of my proudest accomplishment in the class. And then finally, very quickly, the students started metagaming. They really quickly understood that there's the game, there's what Jeff is doing to us in the game, some things that he's got planned, and then why we're actually doing this. So they kind of realized that zombies are a very generic idea to explore different topics. They realized that the game is just to give them experience with which to write about. And so that was kind of fun. So we had different levels that we could kind of move up and down in and discuss at different points. And I found that quite often students would, depending on what they were writing about, would step back and say, so for instance, in the arguing a position, one student in his journal said, having this Rediker plan of sacrificing some people, it's not necessary because those people aren't real. They're just computer code running around. If one dies, the computer will generate another one. So there's no high stakes to this. And so he basically argued slightly outside of the game that, Jeff, this idea is bad because the environment doesn't need it, because it's just the game. But when they all moved over to saving the city of Athens, they're like, Jeff, those are real people who will turn to zombies. So now it's a little different. So that was kind of interesting to see how they worked on those different levels of analysis as well. And so just some references there. Some people I looked at. The Rafe Koster's Theory of Fun is a great quick read. You can find a good PDF of it online that has just sort of the basic information there. And Todd Howard's Why We Play, Why We Create Game Developers Conference talk is a really great one as to like what games can provide in terms of experience. So he has a really great talk there that I highly recommend. And World War Z, awesome book. And so thanks, and any questions? I did, to a large part. The arguing position was the only one where I decided the topic, where I said you have to argue for or against this plan. Every other one was wide open. And I did. Like for example, like the researching a phenomenon paper, I had a student who initially said, I don't like zombies and I don't want to do this. And I was like, great, write that. So what is it about zombies that are maybe offensive, or how would the perception of zombies differ by culture? And so I kind of was working with, even if you don't like something, you can still objectively write about it. And so kind of getting that idea of, I'm not interested in your opinion, but what can you support or not support? The researching phenomenon had the most wide variety of topics, and we kept sort of narrowing down. Just to get that idea of, let's write, let's address a topic, yes or no, and then let's pick something that's difficult and you have to basically rationalize it. Chris?
You talk about the students kind of eventually finding each other and working together in the relationship that had with your homework. Everyone who dies gets these 2 points. Do you think that they were driven to play together because of that specifically? You said you sort of phased that out. Would you do it again that way? Was that what caused that, or?
I think I would do it again. I think it caused them to start working together, start cooperating. But then once they started cooperating, that became much more motivating. So it was basically just a catalyst, because I had one student who's like, I'm afraid to play because if I die, it hurts my teammates. And that's where that student Pixie in the interview, she said, Jeff's not gonna. He won't let us fail that way. Relax. And then even like just talking, like, hey, come over and help me do this thing. At first, they all tried to do it alone, and they were just dying left and right. And so as soon as Chris could come over and help me, and that idea that I can ask you, and that doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. Yeah. Yep.
If a student dies, though, as you said, everything's permanent. So, like, you're on week 2 of a 16-week course and somebody dies, you respawn.
Yeah, I guess, that's the only thing that wasn't permanent, is if they died. But the thing was they would die, and of course, when you respawn, you lose all your items. And and that was interesting, is because what would happen is, originally they were all getting frustrated because they would get items, die, and lose them. But then they got to the point of, hey, run over there and grab my stuff, because I can't make it. So they started talking to one another and looking out for one another's resources.
They're not killing each other for the item.
They never... It never came to that, except for, I think, one time, and then they're like, all right, we're done, it's out of our system. War Machine had to fight somebody.
You should get OU to, like, bring Brooks on campus.
I would love to.
He totally talks about
It's
preparedness.
it's really tempting, and this was, I got one class of this last semester, and the director of the program said, let's do 2 classes this semester. So we're going to do it again this semester, and this time I'm not going to tell each class the other one's playing, so I'll just kind of let them be the other and see what happens when they meet up.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And it'd be really great to work with like a completely other like school or program and have just different groups in there, so you start to see the.
Well, I mean, ultimately, we get to the point that you wouldn't need the fill, like the automatically, if you get 8 different groups or 8 different schools that come in, and we're going to do this over a semester. This is great.
And another benefit that happened, I actually joined, was it University? I forget. Someone in California had a zombie and survival MOOC through Canvas Network. So I joined that, and I grabbed all their material. So now I have some little YouTube videos and things also to kind of facilitate the discussion of different aspects of. They did zombie and morality, zombie and health, diet in the post-apocalypse world. So now my students can look at that as well and analyze those. What's that?
Where was that?
That was I'll find it. I'll Google it at the end of this here, and I'll show it to you. And I have all the files. I downloaded them, and so I just put them up on my course with permission. But yeah, so that's the class, and it's definitely an evolving thing. It's an iterative process. The next big step is to get other classes involved and see where we go. Another thing I'd like to do is get a rotating theme. So maybe in fall, because Athens is famous for Halloween, so fall could be zombies and spring could be something else. So maybe every 4th semester is zombies, and every 4th semester is something else. So, yeah.
Was there a comparison done? Like, I have this class and I have this class, and this is the zombie class, and this is my traditional international student. Right? Like, is there any kind of comparison on how they progress through? Like, I just imagine this being because of that ownership, that level of ownership.
Well, what's interesting is what we did in spring. I used Minecraft as just Minecraft, and I said, we're going to use this game. You guys will go in, you'll do things in the game, and it was a disaster because what happened was the students were very grade driven. They said, Jeff, if you want us to do something in the game, give us points and we'll do it. And I was like, but then that's not your experience, it's an activity. And they're like, yeah, but we need the points. So it didn't go so well. But what we did was we collected data on my students, and we collected data on another group from another class that's more traditional. And we were looking for syntactic complexity in their answers. We found no discernible difference in the writing complexity between the 2 classes, but my students enjoyed the class. They were more engaged. What was interesting was for that class, they felt that as an individual, I liked the Minecraft more than all the others. The other students hated it, but I loved it, and they all said that, which was strange. So we added the zombie element, which gave it more of a theme and a sort of a narrative. So once we had that narrative set in, so now we're collecting data, and we've abandoned the notion of looking at is the writing more complex, because there's something else going on. This idea of ownership and engagement, but what does engagement look like? What does ownership look like? And we're starting to see that. Like Squire has talked about it a little bit. Engagement you should see this as a precursor to engagement. One of the ideas is you have if I can put my own values into the game, that's a precursor to engagement. So what can I do inside of there? Like you play when I play Skyrim, I have my house a certain way. I don't like things moved in my little Skyrim house because that's Jeff's house, and so what can my students do that thing? So we're looking for things like that, and then where do you find that in their writing? How can you point and say that's engagement? If we go back to Stephen's paper, is this engagement where he uses those specific instances? And it's real murky water at this point, but
I mean, just imagine, it had to be so much more enjoyable.
Oh, so much more. The best compliment I got.
Just the value of those papers had to have been tenfold.
Previous classes, I have a list. I'm like, these topics are banned. Smoking,
Yeah.
International students do X. American, it's like divorce.
Right.
All these traditional topics. And the best compliment I got was we have a writing lab, and all the students from all the classes have to go to the writing lab. And the director of the lab, he walks up to me and goes, "I walk in the writing lab the other night, and I hear my tutor say, but you have to say why they eat brains. You never say why they eat brains." And he goes, "I knew it was your class." And I was like, yes, so we even pulled in like the tutors of, the tutors were like, yeah, the students got it because, they would say zombies eat brains. Well, explain why. And if we don't know, and so, having that concentrated conversation, because then I could ask Chris, I was like, well, what do you know about zombies, and what do you know, versus he's talking about smoking, I'm talking about divorce, he's talking about violence in television, which are boilerplate topics. So even if you don't want to use zombies, having this idea of a theme, so we're really kind of exploring it at OU right now, this idea of having just a theme over the entire semester that informs the student writing. Yep. Some other teachers that we're looking at, cyber terrorism was one that a teacher was looking at. Another one wanted to use maybe like a TV show. Could we do something with a TV show? The university is going to put together a war and peace studies kind of theme over several classes, all talking war and peace. So we're looking at how can we get a thing going on war and peace. And the zombie one was sort of our spearhead into this, and so now we're just laying ideas out on the table and seeing. And what's great is my students from this class, a couple of them still show up on the server. I let the old students still join the server to kind of cause havoc. They get to be zombies now. And, I'll throw ideas past them. I was like, what do you guys think if I did this? And so it's kind of fun to keep a conversation going with several of them. Because they started bringing those into the class. We had a zombie run in Athens where there were humans and zombies, and the students came in and said, "Jeff, there will be a zombie run. We all have to go." And I was like, all right, who's going to be the zombies and who's not? And on Halloween we had students, we dressed up as zombies and we all met uptown, and so we tried to kind of expand past just the game and the class, which was fun. That was great too. So yeah, any other questions?
Yeah, were you running like just straight up survival mode on this, so you had hunger meter and that?
Yeah, so we did just because I really wanted it to be survival, and so the only thing I did was at the very, very end when we switched over to the city of Athens, I set it up on creative so they could create little model examples. So one group built kind of a rough sketch of a dormitory and showed how they would protect it, and so. But for 13 weeks, it was all survival.
On the engagement front, I mean, the study aspect is part of that. Is that mostly that we like compared Likert scales between the class that did it with this methodology and one that did it with the traditional? Would you get the engagement out of that?
Yeah, and when we tried that, but the data really, we can see that like yes or no, but like why, and kind of the sticky issue is what does it look like? And so that's where we're really running into. We found that they all enjoyed the game, but I'm not teaching a game in class. So like, how does that go into their writing? So how do we prove it? And we keep thinking to ourselves, an administrator is going to find us out. So when do we set this data on the table and say, it's in the writing? But one of the best data points at this moment is we run all of our papers through SafeAssign, and they give you a percentage of plagiarized, and I'm seeing some of the lowest reports of just usage of other material that I've ever seen. So we can look at that and say, they're not copying this. It's all coming out of their heads. Yeah. And even if you and I write together, and I tell students, write together, because what you perceived it as is going to be slightly different than what I perceived it as. Yeah. So, yeah. You had a question? Okay.
So, if I agree with something, how much
I will say you're teaching middle school. Someone in your room can set up a server.
Oh, yeah.
Those kids are They can. Yeah. What's nice is when you set up a server, you can create a little whitelist, and you basically put in account names, and only those account names can join your server. So I set mine up originally where my 15 students and I could join, and that's it. And then my students are still on the. Two ways you can do it. If you're on, you can see kind of chat logs and things, but then also the server will keep your chat log, so you can look at what gets typed in. And so if you see bad behavior of some kind, that becomes like a class discussion on digital citizenship and what have you. So it's really simple. There's a version Minecraft EDU, and I think somebody presented on it yesterday. And that one has some really nice teacher tools where you can put homework right inside the game and information blocks, and monitoring everything is really easy on that one. So I recommend that's a good one to start. Yeah, that's actually this is kind of a shameless plug, but Dr. Sean Dickers is working on a Minecraft book where he interviews about 30 teachers who are using Minecraft, and I write the server setup chapter, and it's going to be one of those things where the book pays for itself, so you can buy it, or you can get the electronic version for free. So that'll have how to set up and run a server, and in the meantime, I could just send a document, show you how to set things up. It's real simple. Yeah. Any other questions? October now it looks like it'll be March. Originally it was October and it kind of got pushed a little bit, so we're looking at March, early April.
What does it cost to server?
Setting up a server costs nothing if you house it yourself. Now the makers of Minecraft, Mojang, they have a server hosting tool now, so you can get a subscription and they'll run your server for you. I run mine off my desktop computer for nothing. The first time OU found it, they closed it, so I had to play a little dodging with them, but after they realized it was for class, they let it run. So it's definitely something you need to sit down with your IT people and have that discussion of, hey, there's this thing, it's our students are using it, and there's a lot of learning potential, and then they'll get it to, but no cost. Yeah. One big issue with running a server is upload speed. That's the real kicker. So if you run it from home, for instance, and like my Time Warner has very low upload speeds, there's a lot of lag and students get kicked off. So the better internet you can have is all the real money that comes in. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.